Hello, I'm Karen Christensen, host of the Way We Live Now podcast, and I am joined by Jim Peters, who I feel like through Ray Oldenburg, we have this long-standing connection. Jim, tell us about yourself before we dive into a conversation about happy hours.
Well, I'm Jim Peters. I'm the president of the Responsible Hospitality Institute, and we helped to establish the organization in 1983. So we've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
Um, my background was originally in the hospitality industry, and I worked in bars and restaurants. I helped open a nightclub, DJ venue in New York in 1972. Worked in the Hamptons and restaurants, and opened a restaurant in Pittsburgh. Worked in D.C. Came back to get my degree in hotel restaurant administration from UMass in Amherst, and then
Right. Oh,
went on to get a counseling degree. And then it was there when I was working with people arrested for drunk driving. This was 1980, 81, that I saw a relationship between what I used to do in the industry and the people I was treating, and really felt that there was a need to bring more awareness and attention to people who serve alcohol in how they could prevent drunk driving, or impaired driving, as they call it these days.
mm,
And then that led
so
us to do,
important.
yeah,
Yeah.
that led us to do more work, and eventually now, for the past 20 years, we've worked with cities and helping them to plan their nightlife districts.
Right, and you've introduced me to night mayors. A lot of cities around the world have night mayors, and it's such an interesting because it's about social life and bringing people together, but about doing it in ways that are safe for everyone and safe for women in particular. I mean, that's something we might talk about. And I was introduced to Jim essentially by Ray Oldenburg because he left me note. He died in 2022, but he left me all his files and notes. And you were one of the people I found there and contacted. And I know that I think he spoke at some of your events, a couple of your events. Is that right?
Yeah, I came across Ray Oldenburg actually through a man, Scott Hain, who I learned about. He was the author of The World of the Paris Cafe. And he introduced me
Mm,
to Ray, and then Ray and I got to be friends. And he spoke at some of our events. He did a webinar. In fact, he was up in DC at an event. We went with Lynn Bro, who at the time owned Tunnicliff,
oh,
which is one of
yep.
the places he featured in his book.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's a mentor to me. He introduced, obviously, as he has for many people, the concept of the third place. And we've used that concept in a lot of the work that we do.
Which is so it's really I love that connection, and the reason I mean, Jim and I have been in touch, over the last couple of years, but the thing that brought us together to talk about happy hours is a journalist in Illinois wrote to me and said, "I'm doing an article about happy hours, and I'd like to interview you." And my first reaction was negative because, I mean, frankly, I've never been to a happy hour. The idea I've seen signs for them. I wasn't at all a drinker when I was young, at all. And and I remembered what Ray wrote in the original Great Good Place about it being a marketing ploy. I believe that's what he called it. A marketing ploy to get people in, get them drinking, and then they'll just keep drinking. And he saw that as negative, as I do, as you would, I think. Mm, but I started to think about it a little more after this woman contacted me, and I thought, but the name, the idea of a happy hour at the end of the day, I thought, wow, that's actually really attractive. And it fits with other things that Ray wrote about the end of the day. A third place is a place, it's not a place you necessarily spend a whole evening at. It's a place that, is you're a regular, you stop in. So anyway, I started to think the concept, the idea for those who are listening and who are not Americans, because this is an American idea, is a happy hour is a period of time, usually a couple of hours, right? Early in the evening or even late afternoon into the early evening, and the drinks are really cheap, maybe half price, right? Would you say that, Jim? Is that right?
Well, from my own personal history, the happy hour was established by TGI Fridays in the early 70s.
Uh-huh.
And it was a way to get people who are leaving work to come
Uh-huh.
into a bar on a Friday night to get started earlier. And it was two drinks for the price of one, typically from 5 to 7. So
Right.
that was the genesis of it. So it
And
was
TGI Friday means thank God
good.
it's Friday,
Yeah, thank goodness it's Friday. Yeah.
or thank goodness, yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
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 that's
that
a
that
change.
was my early recollection of the happy hour, and
Uh-huh,
then
uh-huh.
it started to catch on as a concept, and then people started to do it, and then sometimes they didn't do it just on Fridays, they started to do it during the week,
Yeah.
and then it evolved to where it was not just 2 drinks for the price of 1 for a limited period of time, but it also included other types of drink promotions and specials. And the way
So,
that
making cheaper drinks, yeah.
right. So there's a bar manager that I know in or that I knew in Monterey, and he told me, "I'm not in the business of selling drinks. I'm in the business of renting space."
Uh-huh.
And so just like Ray points out that the tavern, the coffee shop, the
Mhm.
bar is a space that you go to meet other people and
Yep.
to engage in bartering or to
Uh-huh.
share stories and experiences. There's value to that space. And so the bar owner said,
Mhm.
if I'm
Yep,
only in the business of
yep.
selling drinks, the way I would compete with other bars is on the price of my drinks. And so if I were to compete on the price of Budweiser, because everybody sells Budweiser, then I'm starting to cut into my ability to have the revenue that I need to hire better staff or to keep the
Mm,
bathrooms clean or to fix the furniture. And the more
uh-huh.
I get
Mhm.
into these drink price promotions where they become extreme, then people are more likely to become intoxicated. And then that leads to problems with my staff, problems with maintenance. So I thought it was always an interesting concept that if you think your business is about selling drinks and that the reason that people come to your business is to buy a drink, then clearly you could use pricing as a way to get the customers. But if you really want to emphasize your place as a social gathering place, you want to emphasize the quality of your staff, the quality of your drinks. And then eventually, as there was more awareness about impaired driving, some venues started to shift from drink promotions to food promotions. That if you came
Uh-huh.
during happy hour, you had half price on appetizers.
Mhm.
So this was
Yeah.
again the same way to give value to the consumer, but not necessarily giving it to them based upon the alcohol.
Encouraging them to overconsume alcohol and to keep drinking, because that's one of the things that I, at least as a young woman, I remember thinking that happy hour would be people starting to drink and continuing to drink all
Yeah,
evening.
and then when you're speaking about women, one of the other kind of drink promotions was ladies' night, that women
Mhm.
would get drinks for free. And they would be promoted as ladies' night, and,
Ooh,
you
that
know
gives me the creeps, I have to
well, and
say.
it gave a lot of women creeps because it's basically sending a message, "Come to this bar and you'll be able to meet drunk women," and so therefore any
Yeah,
woman who went would be subjected to
yeah,
harassment by men who thought that they were. Now some would argue that it
yeah.
was just giving women value, and there is the philosophy that, the more women you get into an establishment, the more men will come. And so how do you get more
Yeah.
women into an establishment as if they're a commodity? But yeah, so then that became ladies' nights drink for free, or ladies' nights drink every night for free, or then the
Uh-huh.
promotions got to be, free drinks at midnight, free drinks at closing. And these were the types of promotions when I was involved in
Oof,
counseling people
oof.
arrested for drunk driving that I felt one would create liability against the establishment.
Sure, absolutely. As I think I've told you, my daughter is a prosecutor
Right.
in
So,
Massachusetts, and drunk driving is, uh, is super I mean, I think we're the worst county in the state for drunk
yeah, yeah,
driving.
but I was
Yeah.
involved at that time in lawsuits where bars were being sued for
Yeah,
serving people who were intoxicated who got into accidents.
yeah.
And so then that's when in Springfield, Massachusetts, when you had these establishments doing this free free rounds at midnight, free rounds at
Oof.
closing, free
Oh.
drinks with the gong show, you know,
Uh-huh,
pitchers of pitchers, sold to individuals. So I met with the Liquor Control Commission in Springfield, Massachusetts, and I
uh-huh.
said, these practices not only create risk to the public, but you as a licensing authority could be held responsible if somebody gets involved in an accident and you failed to
Uh-huh.
take action. So that's what led to the first happy hour ban was in Springfield,
Were
Massachusetts.
we the fir Massachusetts had the first ban?
Yeah, it was in Springfield, Massachusetts. So
Oh.
CBS News came and covered the hearing.
Uh-huh,
So
uh-huh.
I was the one responsible for inciting that. So
I
then
see.
other cities in the state began to have happy hour bans. So then the
Oh.
Massachusetts Restaurant Association felt that, it would be better if there was some uniformity throughout the state
Mhm. Uh-huh,
in terms of not
uh-huh,
banning happy hours, but putting restrictions on what you could do.
uh-huh.
And so
Yeah.
if you read the legislation, most of it makes sense. Like you can't sell a pitcher to an individual so that a
Right.
person
Which, I mean,
couldn't
seems
buy.
so obvious, and
Right.
yet yeah.
Or, you can't serve, 2 drinks for the price of 1,
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
and that if you change your price, that price has to be consistent throughout the week.
uh-huh,
So
uh-huh,
there were
uh-huh.
restrictions, but they weren't necessarily onerous, but at the same time, a reasonable person would agree there's no reason why you should have promotions that give women free drinks because that is obviously, a gender-based promotion, which
Uh-huh,
would not necessarily be in the interest of the woman nor in the interest of equality.
uh-huh.
So, and then there were lawsuits by men against establishments saying, why should women get free drinks and men shouldn't? And so, you have all of these consequences of these crazy promotions. So I think when you look at the regulation itself, there's one
Uh-huh,
standard that could be construed as onerous on the part of the establishment. And so rather than repealing the whole law
uh-huh, uh-huh,
and regulations with many common sense regulations in the law,
uh-huh.
just repeal the one section which says, you have to maintain the same price for a drink throughout the week, that you can't have a discounted price just for a specific period of time.
Uh-huh,
So other than that,
uh-huh.
I think most people would agree that the way the Massachusetts law is written, it addresses the risk factors that contribute to excessive alcohol consumption and doesn't necessarily interfere with the business's ability to have other types of promotions like on food or on entertainment or other things that they could promote. And
That would
when
be
you
attractive
when
to
you
people.
start offering discounted drinks which are alcohol based to consumers, you're discriminating against the people who don't want to drink alcohol.
Uh-huh,
So that if I'm a non-drinker, if I don't want to drink alcohol, I have to pay the full price for a non-alcoholic beverage. whereas
Uh-huh.
you're giving a discount to somebody who drinks alcohol. And so then
Uh-huh.
that becomes an inequality. So,
Uh-huh. I mean, the way this topic was raised just recently in Massachusetts is that the Scots came to Massachusetts, to Boston, to play the Haitian team in the World Cup. And the Scots arrived in force. And the Scots are great. The saying I got from, I hadn't heard this before, although it sort of rings true, is no Scotland, no party. And the Scots are the most convivial people. And they came to Boston and they apparently had a great time. And they drank Boston lager without questioning it, or the fact that it was cold, and and it was great for business there. And so there's been this talk about the happy hour and about attr a k attracting and keeping young people in the state, which is an issue. And one of the things is that clearly the politicians are talking about is about making nightlife more attractive. I mean, the thing I love is that they're tying that into having better public transportation. Because when you have better public
mhm.
transportation, you stop worrying so much about people drinking alcohol. And
Yeah. Well, I think it's not a question of drinking alcohol. It's about how much you drink. And yes, conviviality can be facilitated by alcohol, but so can harm. And you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
there's a certain point in time where a person's behavior as they get intoxicated is not only moving from being fun and convivial to being harassing and confrontational to the point where you don't want to be in the presence of somebody who's drunk.
absolutely. There is no question, and that I mean, Ray Oldenburg would agree with that. Absolutely. That there is this, that because his last book was The Joy of Tippling, and tippling means drinking slowly. And
Mhm.
he emphasized how he'd learned to put the beer glass down. You're not, it's about being together. It's about conversation. But as a
Mhm.
woman, I have certainly, my caution about alcohol when I was young is absolutely to do with behavior that I saw or was concerned about. No,
Well, I
absolutely
think
no question.
that's where I think if politicians and others who really want to create better experiences for young people, they should review the literature about what the drinking patterns are among young people,
Mhm.
because there's clearly a shift in when and how people drink alcohol at a younger age. And clearly, there'll always be that demographic of young people who drink to get drunk. But there's also an increasing number who are choosing to not drink because they don't want health implications. And economically, it becomes more expensive. But when you look at what venues are offering, the pricing of craft beers, the pricing of these specialty cocktails and the specialty mocktails, the non-alcoholic drinks, they're comparable in price almost to the alcoholic
Yeah.
version of it. So it's not there's a great saying by this guy Henry King. He used to be the president of the U.S. Brewers Association. He once told me, he said, from his perspective, we're in the business of selling moderate amounts to many instead of a lot to a few. So when you start getting into deep discounted drink prices, you're trying to sell a lot to a few people instead of selling moderate amounts that are at a higher price to many. So that's the goal, is to create your space to be welcoming, to be safe, to be clean, to be sociable. and to have experiences and to have stories and to tell stories. Socializing is about storytelling. Songwriting is about
Yeah.
telling stories. People want to share stories.
Yeah.
Alcohol is the lubricant of sociability because it helps people feel more comfortable. But you don't want it to become an inhibitor of storytelling to where your stories don't make any sense.
Right, absolutely.
So,
But what do you do about all the people who complain to me? I've heard it over and over again as I've been doing research about just the price of the cost of going out, the price of drinks.
yeah, but you're not buying the drink. You're buying the opportunity to sit in a clean place with other people, to have entertainment, that have staff wait on you, that can prepare and have the knowledge of preparing specialty drinks, or that can tell you about the 10 different beers that they have, or educate you about the wines. You're not buying a drink. You're not buying the ingredients of the drink. You're buying the opportunity to have that drink made for you by a professional who knows what they're doing in a way that they're going to assure that you're safe, that you're comfortable, that there are other people there that you could meet and have relationships with, and to have some form of entertainment that has to be paid for. So you're not buying the drink. You're renting the space.
But what if you're not interested in entertainment? You're interested in being with people and the sociability. I talked to a community bar in London, and what they had is they had the craft beers, but they also made sure they had a very inexpensive beer. What's the name of that Australian cheap Australian beer? But for the kind of the locals who'd always gone to that pub, and and that's what I now look for on a menu. I mean, I've been at a pub in Housatonic, which is a little village outside Great Barrington, and I was looking to see. So I'm buying this sort of more expensive beer from. And I wanted a beer. Rooting for England, so I wanted an English beer. But I'm looking to see if there's a cheap beer. They did have, some American, Coors or Budweiser, or whatever, for $5, which I thought was pretty reasonable. Don't you think that's important? Because if you're just, I mean, I don't
Well,
know what
yeah,
the price
you
where
have to
you
have
are,
different
but
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, you have to have different price points, obviously, in everything that you sell. But the fact that people will complain about that things cost more, well, that's true for everything. Now, we just had an interview with a new venue operator in Philadelphia. Now, he does $2 million in sales every year, but his insurance is $300,000. So that's $25,000 a month. So
yeah, wow,
how many cheap beers do you have to sell
yeah.
to pay $25,000 a month for
Yeah,
your
the
insurance?
insurance, that's actually a really good question because this particular pub that I went to for the World Cup, I'd interviewed the owner when she was just setting up, and she said she had cut her hours because by cutting her hours, she could reduce her insurance premium.
And she
So it
could
wasn't
reduce
as
her
late
labor
night.
costs, and labor costs
Yeah,
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 but labor costs are getting really high because
yeah,
places that are in cities that are now catering to a higher income individual who can afford to live in the city are unaffordable for the people who work in the restaurants and the bars and the cafes and the music
yeah,
venues.
yeah, yeah,
So they don't have housing, and so these are the people who have to commute to get into the city to work in a restaurant. And if the public transportation ends at 1 and the bar closes at 2, then you have to take a Uber or a Lyft during peak pricing periods to get home. So you
right.
probably have to work an hour or 2 just to get home. So these are all
Yeah.
the variables,
That come into the
right.
business of it.
So the
Now
business then has to pay enough for the server to be able to get to work and get home again, and then that adds to the price of whatever it is that you're buying. And again, you're not buying the ingredient. If you're so concerned about the cost, just go to your local store, buy your bottle of vodka, buy your bottle of juice, go home and make it yourself, and it'll be more affordable than if you want to go to a space that's clean
Right,
and
but that's the problem in England. I haven't seen statistics in the US, but because people aren't going to pubs as much just because there's such affordability is such a huge it's much more of an issue in the UK than here. And and people love their pubs, but they can drink more cheaply at home, and they are.
yeah, but the
But I
trends.
don't think
We
I
just did a
don't think it's
webinar.
really desire.
Yeah, well, then we just did a seminar. We had Lester Jones, from the National Beer Wholesalers Association. What's happening in the U.S. anyhow is the amount of alcohol that people are consuming is not really being reduced the way that it's being talked about. However,
Uh-huh,
where and how they drink is changing. So
uh-huh,
the amount of alcohol that's being purchased for off-premise consumption, meaning that you're buying it to drink at home, is
uh-huh,
actually beginning to decline. So the
uh-huh,
amount of money that you're spending going out to a restaurant or a bar or a cafe or whatever,
uh-huh.
that percentage is going up. So there's a clear indication, at least
Interesting,
according to the behavior
interesting.
patterns of how people are buying
Uh-huh,
alcohol,
uh-huh,
that they're making decisions that they want to get out of this. I'll just buy myself a home entertainment system, invite my
uh-huh,
friends over, we'll have pizza and beer, and
uh-huh,
that'll be our life. They don't want that anymore. They want the social connections. They want to be
uh-huh, uh-huh,
engaged in
uh-huh,
their community. They want to meet new people. So we're only in the beginning wave of the post-COVID era where people learn to live at
uh-huh,
home and to work at home. But I think it's getting to a point where that's no longer desirable. And it may be that they don't
uh-huh,
have enough money to spend every night to go out to a club, but they want to go to parks, they want to go to free concerts, they want to go to markets. Farmers markets are
uh-huh,
more about socializing than they are about buying fruits and vegetables. And you don't go to a
yeah.
farmer's
So
market.
what would you s Mhm,
Well, I think you
um,
go to a
uh,
farmer's market to socialize as much as you do to buy fruits and vegetables.
uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. So what would you say you see, for me now, thinking about the idea of a happy hour, I like the concept of a happy hour. I like the words, what it means is a happy hour at the end of the workday. I mean, I really love that. At the end of my workday, I'm like, just to chill out. I wish I had a place close to home that I would go routinely, but what do you
Yeah,
think? So
and
what's
again, I
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with a happy hour because if it's defined as an hour and not something that's all day long or at midnight and at closing time, and you get to drink as much as you
Right.
want, that's a different situation. But a happy hour after work, get together with your friends, get some cheap appetizers. And most of the time, the drinks that are offered at a reduced price with today's consumer, it's not the kind of drinks that a
Right, you
lot of
might not
people are
even
gonna want.
want them. Yeah, right. But it's what I like is the idea of a time where we just kind of step out of the rest of all our responsibilities and just hang out for a
Yeah,
little
and you could begin to. I mean, if you're clever at marketing it that way, it's not marketing it and saying, "Hey, look, escape from your daytime problems by coming and having a couple of cheap drinks." Escape from your your daily pressures of work, and meet your friends and enjoy good food and listen to some entertainment, and we'll give you a
and
special on the.
be glad you've accomplished whatever you've accomplished in the day, but, that's done, and yeah.
Yeah, no,
So
yeah, but
so it's
you could
a
always give
different
it. You could always. Yeah, people are always looking for a bargain. It's the question of what's the
Yep,
bargain that you're going
yep,
to give them, and
yeah,
what's the
yeah.
value that they're going to get. So if you have to give them a reduced price on a drink for 2 hours, that's not going to kill anybody. But if you start having drink promotions at closing time where you can drink for free, that's not a
Ye
good idea.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's all that the happy hour ban tried to do, because
Uh-huh.
there were these practices and they were contributing
Yeah.
to risk. So
Yeah.
I think as
Yeah.
long as people are reasonable and, you could have a reduced price drink, but it should only be during a particular period, like you're talking about, where you're trying to get people to come
Yes.
in. Like in Wisconsin, in Madison, when they were trying to have a happy hour ban, the bar supported the happy hour ban on the weekends because they said, why would we want to be discounting our drinks during the busiest nights of our week?
Right, but everyone's going out anyway. Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
during the week, if we want to get some people to come out who didn't come out, well, then we can have a happy hour during. So you could be
Uh-huh.
strategic about it and you could do it for the
Yes.
purpose. But to have a happy hour on a Friday or a Saturday night when you're jam packed doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And you're losing
True.
money. Why would
True.
you want to lose
True.
money?
It doesn't make sense. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's a challenge for restaurants and bars to manage a business that is also social. It's clearly, I mean, that's one of the things I've learned. And so, in the ways that a happy hour can help, I think that's okay. But yeah, I mean, I'm nothing that encourages drunk driving is
Mhm.
acceptable in my view. So,
Yeah.
but I'm all for we need more public transportation that really came up during the World Cup apparently in Boston, having plenty
Yeah,
of
well,
good public transportation.
Europeans are used to that. I mean, they don't
Yes.
understand the way that we drive cars, and
Yeah.
their cars are so small in comparison to ours. I mean, they just are.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
We drive these now. That's where you have more pedestrian fatalities because you have
Yep.
more people. The more you encourage people not to drink and drive, but still give them the message that drinking as much as you want to doesn't prevent them from being intoxicated pedestrians. And now
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
large pickup trucks that where if you would get hit by a car, you would kind of flip over the car. But now because the pickup trucks are so high, they basically just
Yeah.
smash you and you don't flip anywhere, you
Yeah.
just get smashed.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
pedestrians
So
and
that's a
intoxicated
combination.
pedestrians, yeah. There are all kinds of risks that you have to take into
Yes.
consideration, but, alcohol isn't a risk factor unless you don't drink responsibly, and, businesses that rely upon alcohol sales rather than having better staff, clean restrooms, and entertainment for their patrons, they're gonna fail regardless of what they
Yeah.
charge their drinks prices are.
Yeah. It's a really important question that's come up many times as I've been working on this sequel to The Great Good Place, and, what about alcohol? What about alcohol? So this is a great conversation. The fact that you have a responsible hospitality institute, I mean, I was really delighted to learn more about it and really appreciate you joining me today. Thank you,
Okay, well,
Jim.
thank you for the time. I enjoyed
Thank you.
interviewing you too, so,
Yeah, that's right, Jim, and I'll have to put a link to that in the show
yeah.
notes for this one. Thank you, Jim,
Okay,
and I
okay,
hope
thanks
to
a
meet
lot.
you in person one of these days. Okay,
Well,
take
yeah,
care.
well, you could come to Philadelphia. I would give you a workshop on the 3rd
Yep.
place.
Alright, when's that gonna be?
April.
Yeah, Philadelphia's not far away. Alright, let's do it. Thanks for joining me at The Way We Live Now, where we roam the world for ideas and inspiration. Please leave a comment and subscribe to the newsletter at karenchristensen.substack.com.